what if Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan and Maul died on Naboo? What would have happened then? We pick up moments before the two Jedi confronted Maul. Let's begin. The metallic thud of boots on steel echoed through the Theed Palace hangar as Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi's footsteps fell in perfect sync. The Sabrak awaited them, a black-robed figure whose tattooed face and burning yellow eyes marked him as something ancient and deadly. When the Sith Lord's double-bladed lightsaber ignited, its crimson glow cast harsh shadows across the hangar's polished floor. The air crackled with tension until Maul broke into a sprint, his saber staff whirling like a crimson wheel. Master and Padawan moved as one to meet him, their blades catching his in a three-way lock that sent sparks cascading across the floor. Maul fought like a force of nature, each movement flowing into the next with lethal accuracy. He spun his staff in tight arcs, forcing the Jedi to duck and weave as they attacked his defenses. Where Qui-Gon's style carried the steady power of a mountain stream, Obi-Wan's quick strikes darted like lightning, yet neither could land a decisive blow. Their battle carried them toward the plasma refinement chamber, a maze of catwalks and energy gates. The Sith snarled in frustration as his tactics failed. Each time he tried to divide the Jedi, they maintained their unity, forcing him to expend more energy defending against their coordinated assault. But Maul was nothing if not adaptable. He switched to more aggressive forms, his blade becoming a blur of deadly light. In a crucial moment, Maul feinted toward Qui-Gon, then spun unexpectedly toward Obi-Wan. The young Jedi moved to parry, but Maul's blade found an opening. With a vicious thrust, he drove his lightsaber through Obi-Wan's chest. The Padawan's eyes widened in shock as his blue blade flickered and died. No, Qui-Gon's anguished cry echoed through the chamber. The Jedi Master's attacks became fierce, driven by grief but tempered by decades of training. Maul grinned savagely, believing victory was near. But in his moment of triumph, Maul failed to notice Qui-Gon's subtle shift in stance. As the Sith Lord raised his blade to deliver what he thought would be a killing blow, Qui-Gon made his final move. With perfect timing, he drove his green blade through Maul's guard and into his dark heart. The Sith Lord's expression froze in disbelief. But even as death took him, Maul's final act was one of spite. His failing muscles tightened, driving his still-ignited blade into Qui-Gon's body. The two warriors collapsed together, their lives ebbing away on the cold metal floor. Qui-Gon's last thoughts were not of victory or defeat, but of Anakin. As darkness took him, he released his fears into the Force, trusting that the future would unfold as it must. The chamber fell silent, save for the quiet hum of energy gates. Three bodies lay still, their presence in the Force gone. Hours later, when Palace security finally discovered them, the news spread quickly through Theed's corridors, eventually reaching the ears of young Anakin Skywalker. Captain Panaka immediately enacted protocols for both the fallen heroes and the young boy who had helped save their world. The boy is not to be left alone. He's done much for Naboo, Captain Panaka instructed his guards. The days that followed were a blur of victory and mourning. While Naboo celebrated its liberation, the palace prepared for the funeral of their fallen heroes. 2 royal guards were assigned to Anakin at all times, their purple uniforms becoming a constant presence in his peripheral vision. He was given quarters in the diplomatic wing, where the guards brought him meals and checked on his well-being. The Naboo Royal Advisory Council's Social Services Division, one of Queen Amidala's most recent initiatives for helping displaced citizens and refugees, took immediate responsibility for his care. During those first days, as arrangements were made and delegates began arriving from Coruscant, Anakin found himself surrounded by gentle efficiency. The bodies of Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi lay in state in one of Theed Palace's grand halls, where citizens could pay their respects. For 4 days, Anakin moved through the palace halls under watchful eyes. His guards gave him space but remained vigilant. He watched the ceremonial biers being constructed, noticed the solemn faces of arriving Jedi Masters, heard the whispered conversations about what would become of him now. In the midst of victory celebrations and funeral preparations, Padme found a moment to seek out Anakin in his diplomatic quarters. Despite the chaos of post-liberation governance, she knew this couldn't wait. The afternoon light streamed through the tall windows as she watched him trying to distract himself with a small droid part. She had seen enough of the Jedi Order's ways to understand their likely course. Anakin was at least 5 years past their traditional recruitment age. More disturbing was how readily they had allowed Qui-Gon to bring a child into danger. Now, with both Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan dead, who among them would truly champion his cause? "I've been speaking with my advisory council," she began, settling beside him. She explained Naboo's refugee protection programs, systems she had helped strengthen since taking the throne. programs designed to help displaced individuals build new lives, find purpose, and become part of Naboo's community. Then, choosing her words carefully, she made her offer. You could stay here, Anakin, become a citizen of Naboo, and we have the resources to free your mother as well. Anakin's hands froze over the droid part. His voice trembled. Mom? You could really free her? Yes, Anakin, I'm sure we can, Padme said with gentle confidence. After what you did for us, helping free your mother would be the least we could offer. Captain Panaka already has contacts in the Outer Rim. We can send a diplomatic mission, negotiate her freedom. She could have a home here, Anakin. A real home. You both could. Only then did the shadow of doubt cross Anakin's face. But Master Qui-Gon wanted me to be a Jedi. He believed in me. And he was right to believe in you, Padme said carefully. You are special, Anakin. But being special doesn't mean you have to be a Jedi. Look at what you did for Naboo. You saved us. All without being a Jedi. She paused, letting that sink in. There are many ways to help people in this galaxy. The Jedi have their path, but it's not the only one. Anakin sat in silence, overwhelmed by the possibilities before him. His mother's freedom, something he'd dreamed of but never thought possible, now within reach. Yet Qui-Gon's belief in him still pulled at his heart. Padme leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Anakin, you don't have to decide everything about your future right now. But I do know this. No child should have to choose between their family and their dreams. Here you could have both. When he looked up again, tears streaking his cheeks, no words were needed. Padme saw his decision in his eyes and immediately called for Captain Panaka. The security chief entered at her gesture, his bearing professional, but his eyes softening slightly at the sight of Anakin's tear-streaked face. Captain, we need to arrange an immediate diplomatic mission to Tatooine, specifically to Mos Espa, she said. Panaka nodded, already understanding. Anakin's mother, Shmi Skywalker, is to be located and freed, Padme continued, whatever the cost, and I want her brought to Naboo with full diplomatic protection. She glanced at Anakin, who was listening with an almost desperate intensity. She is to be granted immediate citizenship under our refugee protection programs. Of course, Your Highness. I'll see to the arrangements personally, Panaka said. Anakin, Padme turned back to him, her voice gentling. Captain Panaka will keep you informed of everything. Once our team reaches Tatooine, you'll be able to speak with your mother. Anakin nodded, seemingly unable to find words. His hands had finally stilled in his lap, no longer fidgeting with the droid part. I'll see you at the funeral, Anakin, Padme said softly. As she left with Panaka to discuss the diplomatic arrangements, Anakin remained seated by the window. But now, as he watched the afternoon light play across Theed's elegant spires, his expression had changed. The lost look was gone, replaced by something new. On the evening of the 5th day, as Naboo's moons rose over Theed, the funeral pyres were carefully prepared. The city had grown quiet, its victory celebrations subdued in respect for the fallen. The bodies of Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi lay upon their ceremonial biers, their forms peaceful in final rest. Anakin stood among the Naboo delegation now, no longer adrift between two worlds. The flames climbed higher into the night sky, casting wavering shadows across the assembled mourners. Master Yoda and Mace Windu stood with heads bowed, their faces grim in the firelight. Anakin could feel their occasional glances, but they no longer filled him with anxious uncertainty. Among the Naboo delegation, Chancellor Palpatine watched the proceedings with an expression of careful solemnity, though his eyes occasionally drifted to young Skywalker. Master Yoda approached as the flames began to die down, his ancient eyes holding centuries of wisdom and loss. The small master paused before them, studying Anakin with an unreadable expression. The moment of truth had arrived. Reached a decision. The council has, Yoda said quietly, his ancient eyes studying Anakin intently. The crackling of the funeral pyres punctuated the silence between his words. Train you as a Jedi we can, young Skywalker. Wish to come with us, do you? Anakin met the Jedi Master's gaze with surprising steadiness for one so young. Behind him he could sense Padme's quiet presence. Master Yoda, Anakin began carefully, his voice small but clear against the night air. Queen Amidala has offered me a home here on Naboo. She's arranging for my mother's freedom. The ancient Jedi's ears twitched slightly at this news, though his expression remained serene. Around them, the embers of the funeral pyres cast a dim glow across the gathering. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine had paused in his departure, watching the exchange from a discreet distance. Choose another path, you would? Yoda asked, studying the boy carefully. Yes, Master, Anakin replied simply. I want to stay here, with my mother. Padme stepped forward then, her presence both regal and protective. Yoda's ancient eyes turned to her, and she met his gaze steadily. Though her face remained diplomatically neutral, the Force whispered of her carefully contained feelings. Her disappointment in how a 9-year-old child had been brought into a war zone. Her resolve that this boy would not be left adrift again. "The will of the Force. Mysterious it is," Yoda said, after a thoughtful pause. "Many paths to destiny there are." His Geimer stick tapped softly against the stone floor as he shifted his weight. "Not all who serve the light must be Jedi." Padme placed a gentle hand on Anakin's shoulder. Without another word, she guided him away from the funeral site, her handmaidens and guards falling into step around them. As they departed, Yoda watched them go, sensing the currents of the Force shifting around this unexpected turn of events. The future had shifted this night, though none could yet say how far the ripples would spread. Within 2 weeks of the funeral, Captain Panaka's diplomatic mission succeeded in securing Shmi Skywalker's freedom. Mother and son were reunited in Theed, where they were provided accommodations in the Lake Country's refugee settlement program, a carefully planned community that helped new citizens integrate into Naboo society. The Skywalkers were given a modest but comfortable apartment in one of Naboo's integration centers, where new citizens learned about their adopted culture while receiving education and career training. As part of Naboo's standard integration protocol, Anakin underwent comprehensive aptitude testing. The results showed exceptional talent in engineering and piloting. The Education Board recommended a specialized program at Theed's prestigious flight academy with additional focus on engineering studies. Shmi too found her place. Her mechanical knowledge and natural nurturing abilities made her valuable to the integration center itself. She was offered a position helping other refugee families adjust to their new lives, while also training in Naboo's advanced agricultural systems. Queen Amidala, despite her increasingly busy schedule, made time to check on Anakin's progress during those early months. Her visits became less frequent after she transitioned to her role as senator, moving primarily to Coruscant. It was Chancellor Palpatine, however, who became an unexpectedly constant presence in Anakin's life. The newly appointed Supreme Chancellor never seemed too busy to inquire about the boy's progress whenever he returned home to Naboo. He would find time to visit the flight academy, showing particular interest in Anakin's achievements. "My boy," he would say, "you continue to exceed all expectations. Your mother must be very proud." To the faculty and other students, it seemed natural that the Supreme Chancellor would take an interest in the former slave who helped save their planet. His mentorship appeared to be nothing more than paternal kindness toward a promising young man from humble beginnings. When Anakin was 12, tragedy struck. Shmi Skywalker was killed in what appeared to be a tragic accident at one of Naboo's agricultural facilities. The investigation found evidence of sabotage, but no culprits were ever identified. Padme, tied up with crucial Senate votes on Coruscant, could only offer comfort through holocalls. It was Palpatine who stepped forward, expressing deep concern for the boy's welfare, and becoming his legal guardian, essentially. "The boy needs stability," he argued to Naboo's Child Welfare Council. "As Supreme Chancellor, I have the resources to ensure his continued education and care." None questioned his motivations. It seemed a gesture of extraordinary kindness from a powerful man who had taken a fatherly interest in an orphan child. In the days following his mother's death, Anakin was haunted by strange sensations he'd felt just before the accident. Unexplained unease, troubling dreams. During one of their regular conversations, he told Palpatine about this. The Chancellor listened with careful attention, his response measured and sympathetic. "The mind often plays tricks on us in times of loss," he said gently. Then, after a thoughtful pause, he said the following. "Though throughout history, there have been those who could sense such things even before they happen." He let the conversation move to other topics, but the idea had infected Anakin's mind. In the months that followed, Anakin's grief twisted into something darker as he obsessed over those mysterious feelings, convinced they had been warnings he hadn't understood. If only he had known how to interpret them. If only he had been trained in the ways of the Jedi, of the Force, he thought. Upon taking guardianship of Anakin, Palpatine installed him in the ancestral Palpatine estate in Naboo's Lake Country. The sprawling mansion, with its centuries of noble history etched into every stone, became Anakin's new home. While Palpatine's duties kept him primarily on Coruscant, a small but efficient staff of house servants and tutors attended to Anakin's needs. The vast estate often felt eerily empty to Anakin, its numerous wings and chambers largely unused. Once, during his early days there, he'd asked one of the older servants about the house's history. The servant mentioned quietly that the Chancellor's own family had died in an accident years ago, when Palpatine was around Anakin's age. Anakin didn't pursue the subject further, though sometimes, late at night, he found himself wondering about the strange emptiness of the place, the way certain wings remained perpetually closed, the odd shadows that seemed to linger in forgotten corners. It was in this environment of faded nobility and quiet solitude that Anakin's transformation began. The house's extensive libraries became his refuge, filled with ancient texts and artifacts that Palpatine had happened to mention might interest him. The discovery came on a stormy evening, typical of Naboo's wet season. Anakin had been restless, wandering the mansion's halls after another dream about his mother. Something pulled at him, a whisper so faint he might have imagined it, leading him to Palpatine's private study. The Chancellor had left it locked, of course, but locks had never been much of an obstacle for Anakin's mechanical aptitude. Among the various antiquities and curios, one object stood apart, small, geometric, with edges that seemed to absorb the room's light rather than reflect it. The whispers grew stronger as Anakin approached it, promises of power and understanding dancing at the edges of his consciousness. He spent hours that night just sitting near it, trying to understand what he was feeling. Over the next few weeks, Anakin found himself returning to the study repeatedly. Sometimes he'd attempt to open the device, sensing there was something more to it, but it remained stubbornly sealed. Still, even unopened, its presence seemed to awaken something in him. Objects would move when his emotions ran high, and sometimes he could almost glimpse things before they happened. When Palpatine returned for one of his periodic visits to Naboo, Anakin could no longer contain his curiosity. During their usual evening conversation, he gathered his courage. "Chancellor," he began carefully, "in your study, there's an object, a device of some kind. I can feel something from it, something powerful." Palpatine's expression revealed nothing, but his eyes gleamed with careful interest. "Oh, how fascinating." He paused thoughtfully. "You know, my boy, there are many ancient artifacts in this galaxy whose powers few understand. The Jedi would have us believe such knowledge belongs only to them, but history," he smiled slightly, "history tells us otherwise." Anakin leaned forward eagerly. "Could you teach me about it?" "Perhaps," Palpatine replied, his voice measured. "But such knowledge requires careful study, dedication. Are you certain this is something you wish to pursue?" The eagerness in Anakin's yes brought a carefully concealed smile to Palpatine's lips. The boy had taken the first step on a path he had so carefully laid out. The years that followed shaped Anakin in ways that would have been unimaginable to the boy who once helped save Naboo. Palpatine arranged the finest tutors and educational opportunities through his position as guardian. To the public eye, Anakin Skywalker became the perfect example of Naboo's meritocratic ideals, a former slave rising to prominence through his guardian's patronage and his own natural brilliance. At the same time, behind closed doors, in the shadowy training facilities hidden deep within Palpatine's estate, Anakin's power in the dark side grew exponentially, and as his powers grew, so did his questions. During their evening discussions in Palpatine's study, the conversations often turned to history and philosophy. The Chancellor had a gift for making such talks feel natural, letting Anakin's curiosity guide them to precisely where he wanted. "It's fascinating," Anakin said one evening, examining an ancient text about the Battle of Ruusan. "I never knew there was so much more to that period than what we learned in school." "History, my boy, is written by the victors," Palpatine replied, carefully selecting a datapad from his collection. "The Jedi prefer a simplified version of events. But consider, an entire order of Force users, wiped out because they dared to challenge the status quo, because they believed the galaxy needed more direct action to end suffering." The idea took root in Anakin's mind. During his studies at the Engineering Academy, he would often find himself thinking about the worlds beyond Naboo's borders. "The Republic has stood for over 1,000 years, Palpatine observed during another such discussion, with the Jedi as its self-proclaimed guardians. Yet slavery still exists in the Outer Rim. Corruption flourishes. One might wonder, what exactly are they guarding? Does all this suffering not deserve their attention? Perhaps it has something to do with their belief that attachment clouds judgment," Anakin responded, repeating what he'd heard about the Jedi. "Ah, yes, detachment." Palpatine's tone was thoughtful rather than critical. "A convenient philosophy, isn't it? To observe suffering from a distance, claiming non-interference as wisdom. Tell me, what has such detachment achieved for the slaves of Tatooine?" These conversations, spread over years, shaped Anakin's worldview. He came to see the Jedi not as heroes, but as privileged observers, claiming moral authority while allowing injustice to persist. Their destruction of the Sith began to look less like a victory for peace, and more like the elimination of those who would actually act against evil. The dark side offered a seductive contrast: direct action, personal responsibility, the power to effect real change. When Anakin finally accessed the holocron's full teachings, its messages of embracing passion and strength resonated with conclusions he thought he'd reached on his own. By the time he was 17, Anakin's transformation wasn't just about power. It was driven by conviction. He believed the Jedi's way had failed the galaxy, failed his mother, failed countless others suffering while the Jedi contemplated serenity in their temple. The name Darth Vader came to him not just as a title, but as a promise to be everything the Jedi were not. Decisive, active, and willing to embrace the power needed to reshape a broken galaxy. Despite his growing immersion in the dark side, Anakin never completely forgot about Padme. Her election as senator and move to Coruscant meant their paths rarely crossed, though he would occasionally find himself following news of her political career from afar. But such thoughts remained peripheral. His training demanded his full attention. As Anakin's 19th year drew to a close, Palpatine knew the time had come. The grand plan was approaching its critical phase, and he wanted his apprentice close when the Jedi Order faced its final hours. More than that, there was a delicious irony in having the one they might have trained as their prophesied chosen one become an instrument of their destruction. Through years of careful training, Palpatine had taught Anakin his most crucial skill, the art of concealment. Just as the Dark Lord had hidden his true nature from the Jedi for decades, Vader learned to shroud his immense power in the Force, appearing as nothing more than a Force sensitive who had never received training. The perfect disguise, hiding a nexus of dark side energy beneath an unremarkable surface. The position of Special Technical Advisor to the Supreme Chancellor's Office for Defense Innovation was created as perfect cover. The official announcement emphasized both Anakin's technical brilliance and his unique connection to the Chancellor, the former war-turned-trusted protege, now ready to serve the Republic. From his office in the Republic Executive Building, Palpatine watched his carefully laid plans unfold. His apprentice, his weapon, now perfectly positioned at the heart of the Republic, invisible to the very Jedi who walked the Senate halls. The Dark Lord allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Everything was proceeding as he had foreseen. The carefully maintained facades began to blur. Anakin and Padme's relationship grew despite their political differences, their connection deepening as the galaxy descended into chaos. Palpatine watched their attachment blossom with calculated interest, seeing it as another tool in his arsenal of control. The Clone Wars erupted across the galaxy, and with each crisis, Palpatine's powers grew. Padme voiced her concerns about the Chancellor's expanding authority, leading to tense discussions with Anakin. Yet their feelings for each other remained unchanged, even as they found themselves on opposite sides of increasingly crucial votes in the Senate. Anakin knew on some level that his master was orchestrating the entire conflict. Palpatine had never hidden this from him, though he kept the full scope of his plans obscured. "All proceeds as designed," he would say whenever Anakin questioned particular developments, and Anakin accepted this. After all, Palpatine had never steered him wrong, had never failed to reveal things when the time was right. Finally, as the war reached its crescendo, Palpatine summoned Anakin to his private office late one night. "The time has come, my apprentice," Palpatine said, his voice carrying a resonance Anakin had rarely heard before. "You are ready to become a true Sith Lord. But first, there is one final task." "Anything, Master," Anakin said. "Count Dooku must die. By your hand." Anakin's surprise was evident. "How am I to find him?" he asked. Palpatine's thin smile carried decades of cunning. "Dooku has always been exactly where I needed him to be, Lord Vader. He, like so many others, has been merely a tool in our grand design. Even now, he awaits my signal in the work's industrial sector, in a private facility I maintain there." Understanding dawned in Anakin's eyes as pieces fell into place. The war, the political maneuvering, all of it orchestrated by his master with precision that bordered on artistry. The confrontation took place in a shadowy hangar deep within the works, Coruscant's vast industrial sector. When Dooku arrived, expecting new instructions from his master, he found instead his replacement. The realization that he had been nothing more than a placeholder in Sidious's grand game, that his turn from the Jedi path had led him here, twisted his aristocratic features with rage. The duel was brief but fierce. Dooku's elegant mastery of Form 2 met Vader's raw power and decades younger reflexes. In the end, youth and fury prevailed over experience and elegance. As Dooku fell, his eyes held not fear but bitter understanding. All his beliefs about bringing order to the galaxy, his conviction in leaving the Jedi Order, had only served to make him another pawn in Sidious's machinations. Palpatine watched from the shadows, his satisfaction complete. Everything was in place for the final act. After Master Yoda's departure for Utapau to confront Grievous, Palpatine orchestrated his grand revelation. During a meeting with several council members, with Anakin present, he unveiled his true identity as the Sith Lord. The Jedi attempted to arrest him, but they had unknowingly walked into a trap. Master and apprentice moved as one. Palpatine's lightsaber, severing Mace Windu's hand, while Anakin's red force lightning consumed the other Jedi. Palpatine wasted no time. He framed the incident as a Jedi attempt to overthrow the Republic, immediately issuing Order 66. While clone forces assaulted the temple, facing unexpected resistance from its ancient security systems, Anakin was dispatched to Mustafar. The temple's lockdown protocols bought time for many Jedi and younglings to escape through hidden passages, but eventually fell to the overwhelming clone forces. On Mustafar, Vader eliminated the Separatist leadership with cold efficiency. By the time he returned to Coruscant, Palpatine had declared himself Emperor. He found Padme distraught over the Republic's transformation, but rather than argue, he offered comfort and promises of a better future. His suggestion to include her on the Imperial Ruling Council, which Palpatine readily accepted, helped ease her fears about the Empire's direction. Not long after Luke and Leia were born, the galaxy settled into its new order, with Vader as the Emperor's right hand and Padme becoming the Council's most influential voice, far overshadowing even Mas Amedda in popular support. But in this time of peace, old questions began to surface in Vader's mind. His thoughts turned increasingly to his mother's death, the suspicious circumstances, the convenient timing. Finally, he could no longer ignore his suspicions. He traveled to the Imperial Palace, the former Jedi Temple, to confront his master. Palpatine, sensing Vader's turmoil, dismissed his guards for their meeting. He wove a convincing denial about Shmi's death, one that Vader wanted to believe. And he did, but as Vader rose to leave satisfied, the dark side whispered to him, just as it had to Darth Tenebris's apprentice in that cave on Baldemnik, just as it had to Palpatine himself in the Kaldani Spires when he ended Plagueis. The moment crystallized with perfect clarity. Palpatine, distracted by Coruscant's skyline, the guards dismissed, no witnesses, the opportunity that every Sith apprentice awaits. Vader moved with lightning speed, channeling the dark side into a torrent of crimson force lightning before Palpatine could mount any defense. As the energy coursed through his former master, the dark side laid bare all of Sidious's hidden thoughts. The calculated murder of Shmi, years of careful manipulation, every step of his grand design exposed in brutal clarity. Anakin's rage exploded. He poured more power into the lightning, screaming his fury as Palpatine's flesh darkened and smoked. Even after his master's life signs faded, Vader continued the assault, drawing so deeply on the dark side that he felt he might dissolve into it entirely. Finally, it was done. The Emperor, who had orchestrated decades of galactic manipulation, lay dead by his apprentice's hand. Vader walked out unseen, his presence in the Force ensuring any witnesses would forget ever having seen him. In the days that followed, reports circulated of a mysterious assassination, though no evidence was ever found. Anakin delivered a moving speech to the galaxy about continuing Palpatine's legacy of order and stability. The ruling council, recognizing both practical necessity and political reality, unanimously supported his ascension to Emperor. None dared oppose him. His position as Palpatine's right hand, his popularity across the galaxy, and his raw power made him the only logical choice to prevent factional warfare. Emperor Skywalker's reign brought a new era. Working in concert with Padme, whose influence on the council only grew, they maintained the Empire's efficiency while gradually implementing reforms. Padme never fully embraced the Empire's structure, but she acknowledged its effectiveness in maintaining peace and order. Anakin, in turn, supported her initiatives, except for any that might destabilize the Imperial system itself. As Luke and Leia grew, Anakin taught them the ways of the Force, preparing them to eventually take control of the empire he and Padme had built. He trained them in both the power of the dark side and the importance of balance, determined that his children would understand the full scope of their heritage and responsibilities. As for surviving Jedi, the death sentence on all of them were called off by Anakin after Padme recommended it, and they were given a chance to serve the Empire in the Outer Rim. Some took up this opportunity, others did not. On a distant swamp world, Master Yoda succumbed to his death stick addiction, taking with him the last vestiges of an age that had given way to a new kind of order, one built by a former slave who had chosen his own path to power.